Hey, what is up guys, how are we doing, and welcome back to another video. Now today I want to talk to you about graphics cards because I've got the RX 580. In particular, it's this one, which is the Strix edition, and it is a absolutely huge graphics card. It is pretty damn heavy, it's pretty long at 30 centimeters, and it takes up 2.5 slots. So it's a very big graphics card, so do check that it does actually fit in your case before actually considering buying this thing. And so, taking a closer look at it, it is essentially a RX 480 with a slightly higher clock speed with slightly higher power requirements. This one, it is 30 centimeters long and it is 2.5 slots, but it also features a 3-fan design and takes advantage of that extra length and extra width. On the I/O of the card, we've got 2 HDMI sockets. These are HDMI 2.0, and of course you can hook one up to a VR headset if you so desire. 2 DisplayPort connections, and then we've got 1 DVI connection as well. Now, around the back of the graphics card, we do have a backplate. It looks pretty good. I mean, you will get some GPU sagging regardless, but we do have a nice looking backplate with an RGB Asus logo as well. Move to the top of the graphics card and you'll find that once again it is pretty tall, but you will find that we have an RGB illuminated text with some LEDs behind that will glow nicely in your case, along with an 8-pin power connector that you will of course need to hook up to your power supply. The front of the card features more RGB though, and this will create some pretty cool effects in software. It's a good looking graphics card overall. Once you've got it in your system, I think you'll be quite happy with how it looks. And because it's black with RGB, it will fit into pretty much any setup regardless of the color scheme that you do want to go for. And finally, moving to the right hand side of the graphics card, you'll find 2 fan headers that can be connected to your case fans, and then these fans will actually ramp up in relation to your GPU temperature rather than your CPU temperature, which can be useful in games that don't really tax the GPU. One thing that is missing here that was on the 1080 Ti graphics card is a header for some RGBs. It would be nice to see it actually included because a lot of people don't have Asus motherboards and won't be able to control all the lighting in their case together, but it's not really a big deal, as I'm sure a lot of people probably wouldn't use this functionality anyway. So that's everything really you need to know about the design and appearance of the graphics card. In terms of performance, we'll start with the acoustics and the thermals. 61 degrees was the highest I was able to get this card to go to, which I think is very impressive, and when you compare it to graphics cards of old that easily hit around about 80-90 degrees, I think it's pretty impressive. Acoustically as well, this card remains silent under low load, and ramping it up to some proper gaming and taxing the graphics card, it's audible but it's still pretty quiet, and if you've not really upgraded your graphics card in a few years, it's a pretty sure bet that this will be quieter than what you've got at the moment. But of course, what you really want to know is how this card performs, and performance is a mixed bag, and the reason for this is because personally, I don't really see why AMD felt the need to do a refresh of these graphics cards, because looking at the performance here, it's more or less identical in every single test than the 480. And in fact, some of my benchmarks actually thought this was a 480, identified it as a 480, which is pretty funny really, because if you have a 480, there is no need to even think about upgrading, because this is pretty much exactly the same thing. But that's not necessarily a bad thing if you are in the market for a new graphics card, because my personal award for Graphics Card of the Year went to the 480 because it does represent great price and performance. As you can see from all these benchmarks, it is a very good card, it performs very well, and it's more or less neck and neck as well with the 1060. Some games will prefer the 1060 by a few frames, some will favour the 580 by a few frames, and it does represent very good value for money as long as you are buying the appropriate graphics card. If you are looking at running this at a high resolution, so something like 3440 by 1440 or 4K, it's not really going to be ideal. I mean, if you turn down some of the settings on an ultra wide display, then it's going to be absolutely fine, especially if it is a FreeSync display. But for 1440p and 1080p gaming, this is an excellent choice for you. I think my main problem really is actually, unfortunately, with this particular version, the Strix version, and that's just because it's priced at around about £280 at the time of filming, which I think is just too much for someone to spend on this card. I think most people would be better off getting a 4GB version and paying around about the £200 mark, because that £80, it does enable you to run higher resolutions, but the card doesn't really have that much power to do so. So I think a lot of people are better off either getting a card like this when it's in the sale, when it's a little bit cheaper, or saving their money, getting a 4GB version, because the downsides of a 4GB version are that you can't run higher resolutions as well, and you're going to need to turn some of the textures down in some really demanding games. I think that's a compromise a lot of people are going to be willing to do. And at this end of the market, £80 is a lot, and I don't really think it's worth it in this particular application. I can't fault Asus's execution of the Strix, it's just not necessarily the best value proposition on a graphics card that is pretty much marketed as a value graphics card. So there you go, overall this wins the recommended award. The 580 is a cracking card. I strongly recommend that if you are in the market for a graphics card, then you do consider it, but do assess all the different options out there rather than just going for the one that looks the fanciest. Thanks to Corsair for sponsoring this channel as always. A massive thank you to Asus for supplying this review sample, and I will be doing some builds with cards like this, so stay tuned just for them and click the link somewhere over there for more graphics card reviews. Massive thank you once again, links to this product down below, and I'll see you in the next one.